This is going to be a tech talk presentation about Polygon Zero Knowledge EVMs. Session today, as I said, is going to be a tech talk about Polygon Zero Knowledge EVM. To say this has definitely been the hardest challenge I think I've had to research for intelligence on chain since the entire time I've been here, even before that as a threader as well. So I believe the best way to try and understand the technology is to try and break it down, have a main aim, have some questions, and hopefully those that are reading and listening will be able to answer those questions by the end of the session, which tells me that I've done a good job and they understand it, which is the key thing here. There aren't many abbreviations that I'll be using in this, luckily. So these are just the four to be aware of. You've got Zero Knowledge, ZK, EVM, Ethereum Virtual Machine, which I'll explain later on. You've got SNARKs, which is Succinct Non-Interactive Argument of Knowledge. Again, I'll explain those later on. They're an integral part of the current proof. And then you've got STARKs, not as in Tony Stark, but as in Scalable Transparent Argument of Knowledge. Again, I'll explain that later on in the presentation. So let's start with the team first. So as you can see, there are a number of different founders and contributors to the overall leadership of Polygon. I said I would focus on three, and those three are Sandeep, Hilo, and a chap called Jordi. Jordi's very interesting. He's got a very interesting history, which we'll touch on in a bit. Now, Sandeep, he started off as a computer science engineer, I think about 2010, if I remember, and gaining some valuable experience there. He moved to Deloitte as an intern for about a year, and then after that, he made a very quick transition to head of technology and supply chain. After about a year, he moved on to scopeweaver.com, which I think is still going. He was there for just over a year and a half before he joined Polygon as a co-founder. On the academic side, obviously he's done very well. He's got an MBA from the National Institute of Industrial Engineering in Finance and Supply Chain Management. That's also partly why he became head of technology at Deloitte. And Sandeep is doing very well for himself. He's a millionaire. And he also started up a COVID relief fund to help the people of India. So that's to help for the immediate after relief, and also to help prepare for future outbreaks of the disease, or that or any other diseases. The relief fund raised about $2.2 million, and it also had a very generous donation from the one and only Vitalik Buterin, who's got a very good relationship, and that also ties in nicely with how Polygon's overall relationship has blossomed with Ethereum, as it's mutually beneficial. That's Sandeep. He was there at the Polygon zkEVM mainnet release. And then you've got Hilo. So he's got MSc in computer science from University of Belgrade, Central Europe, for those of you that don't know. Prior to entering the Web3 blockchain industry, he co-founded an AI-powered platform within the automotive industry, and he had a number of other startups as well. He then joined Polygon in 2019, and he's been there ever since, spearheaded the direction and architecture of the revolution as well. Now, there isn't a lot of other information on Hilo. His LinkedIn actually says, he's got a big statement on there that just says, I don't update this. And there's not really much on him. I had a good little look around. He's quite a conservative chap, but he certainly played a massive role in Polygon's evolution. And then final guy, Jordi Belena. Now, he's actually one of the founders of the White Hat group. Don't know if you guys remember, but there was a group towards Ethereum's early days where they would go around and they would act as white hats, and they would try and rescue millions and millions of dollars from malicious hacks. And I think he famously managed to gain back well over 100 million, and also control of the hackers' funds. He remained anonymous for quite some time, as you'd imagine with these sort of things. And then he came out, then moved on to teaching blockchain technology, I think in Barcelona. He's done a lot of freelance work for penetration testing and security. He's done a lot of audits as well. And then yeah, he joined the Polygon team in 2019 around the same time as Mihailo, and yeah, he's been an integral part of the technology side ever since. So yeah, he's quite an interesting chat. It's very energetic, and when I listened to him on the mainnet beta launch, he seemed to be doing the most talking with Vitalik on there as well. So these are the three main guys. EVM stands for Ethereum Virtual Machine. Ethereum Virtual Machine is pretty much like the engine. So it allows you to create code, create smart contract. It allows for developers to compile programs, different languages. It helps with compiling and deploying that to the Ethereum chain. Takes snapshots of states as well, balances, and it then sends this information to the Ethereum node and allows that to interact with the chain. Another way of putting this, of how it works, I've just used MS Word as something that's most people know. If you think of that as being an EVM, and then you've got different languages, Japanese, Portuguese and French, or in blockchain terms, I don't know, Solidity, Viper and Python, for example. Let's just say those three people are got code or smart contracts, and they're using these different languages. Word is your EVM. It allows you to construct all that together, allows you to save it, allows you to put it on the cloud, and then the person who needs to read that in English is, say, Ethereum. They'll be able to open it up, and they'll be able to translate it and interpret the instructions that you've put on those documents. Now, what does this have to do with Polygon? Well, Ethereum been around, I think, since 2015. So masses of volume, lots of traffic, gas is really high. So it is impossible for it to scale on its own. It needs help. And that's where these EVMs come into it. So because these EVMs allow new dApps, new protocols, new smart contracts to be built on it, it's able to, with the right protocol that decides to purely function as a scaling solution, it can receive the help it needs. So these EVMs are an opportunity for scaling to happen on the Ethereum chain. And where Polygon comes into it is Polygon is a layer 2 scaling solution that have been using their EVM for quite some time and are trying to advance the technology. Now, when I say advancing the technology, this is where the zero knowledge part comes into it. What is a zero knowledge rollup? Now, a zero knowledge rollup, also known as zk proofs, is a scaling method that's been really pushed into the spotlight over the last couple of years or so. I certainly first heard about it in 2021 when I was looking at a video, I think from Edo Trades of all people on YouTube. Now, it addresses the issue of scalability, commits significantly more transactions to the Ethereum network, especially in Polygon's case, with proof of validity that the transactions were completed and proved off-chain, and it only then needs to submit a proof with limited information on it. This creates the privacy element, which is something I'll expand on a little bit later on. The privacy element of the zero knowledge side of it, it's also a very attractive business use case. And there's actually a protocol called Aztec, which is taking massive advantage, and I suppose first mover advantage on that as well. More on that later. As well as the increased privacy, as I mentioned earlier, this also allows for significantly more transactions. Now, because it can take more transactions and use that to be proved and eventually broadcast onto the Ethereum chain, this is where the scalability side comes into it. And this is where Polygon and other scaling solutions play a big part. How does it work? So this is the 4-year-old explanation. Now, imagine I've just put a task here. You're trying to prove to your friend you're speaking to that you're at a football match recently, and you need to do it without needing to show everyone else's identity, and you want to try and do it quickly. So if you look at the before screenshot, I'm not in that crowd, by the way, but just for example's sake, and that's not me, but just pretend I'm this guy here at the front with both arms up right at the front, having the time of his life. And if I was to take a snapshot and then try and prove to my friend that I was there and do it quickly, it would take me a little while to find myself and do that. So if, let's say, I had the same picture, but put this blue canvas over it with a hole where I am, it's very easy to prove that I was there, and it's done incredibly quickly without revealing everyone else's identity. That's a lot of what a zero knowledge proof tries to do. So it's the privacy element, it's the speed element, and it's the proof element at the same time. Technical for explanation. So on the technical side, you can take the initial state of the EVM chain, and then from there you create a new state with the additional transactions that need to be processed. So let's say there's 1,000 extra transactions. Now, what happens is those extra transactions are taken off-chain and they are processed via CPU by a method called zkSNARK, so zero-knowledge snarks. I'll explain what snarks are in a little bit. The snarks, they aggregate all the transactions together. They do it simultaneously, and they use a recursive functionality, which I'll talk about in a bit. They aggregate it until there's a point where it's got one proof, and then that proof is sent along with the final state of the network, i.e. with all the gas and etc. has been calculated, to the sequencer, which then broadcasts that on the Ethereum chain. In terms of how that works, let me just pause this, and I'll actually show you the sequencer ID on Ethereum's chain using a block ID from Polygon's zkEVM Explorer. So on the batches side, so this is the zkEVM Polyscan. So it's different from the normal Polyscan. It's only been live, I think, since the end of March this year. Now, if I just pick one of these, for example, and I'll just pick this one, 10153. I was talking about the sequencer earlier, the sequencer transaction hash. So if I just open this one, this takes you straight to the Ethereum, the Etherscan on there. And you can see on here, so this is the sequencer address. Just to prove that, this is the only sequencer you've got currently on the Polygon zkEVM network. So that's the sequencer, and that has broadcast that proof to the Ethereum chain there. You can see by that transaction, which is the same one here on the Polygon Ether chain. And you notice as well, it doesn't need to broadcast all the extra information around it at all. It's just got the necessary information. From what I could tell, it only cost 10 cents in Matic to actually broadcast it via the sequencer as well. So it's done its job. I've also got I looked at some of the stats as well that they've had recently since the inception of the mainnet beta. So if you look at the average block time, obviously there were some teething problems around the first few days, but since then, the speed at which it takes to complete the formation of the blocks has gone down significantly. So if I take the most recent one, yesterday it was 32.06 seconds, the day before it was 24. It has gone up a little bit, so to me that tells you that there is still a lot of work to do. The technology is still in its infancy in that respect. Speed is there. There's one sequencer at the moment. I imagine when they evolve the technology and they go from beta to, I guess, the alpha, or like the final version, there'll be more of these sequences available. The daily transaction chart as well, you can see that obviously there was a big spike around launch in the first early few weeks. Volume is still stable, a little bit on the decline a little bit. It's still quite new. And the dashboard itself, there's not many metrics at this point in time. I'd imagine there'll be more as this continues to evolve. There's not really a lot at the moment, as you'd expect. It's only a few weeks old, but yeah, certainly the scaling of transaction, as we've just seen, is proven to actually work. I mentioned earlier about two projects within Polygon, i.e. Polygon Labs. They are Hermez and Zero. So these two projects have actually joined together, and they've worked together in unison to actually form this zkEVM. Polygon Zero, it's the computational part. So when we were looking at the proof earlier and talking about how that is completed off-chain via CPUs, that's mainly done by Polygon. That was mainly built by Polygon Zero. So Polygon Zero is actually mainly the team from Mir Protocol. I don't know if any of you guys have heard of it, but Mir Protocol, they started looking at zero-knowledge tech, I think it's a few years. And it was round about early 2022 when Polygon recognized what they were doing and decided to buy them out and absorb them into Polygon Zero, and they are now the main core of Polygon Zero's team. So they are the brains behind the, I suppose, like the proving element of this zkEVM. Makes its way to the EVM through the nodes and onto the Ethereum network, as we've just seen in their block explorer. Out of the two, I just want to dig into Polygon Zero a little bit more. So as we said earlier, the proofs are executed by CPUs. And actually, Mihailo mentioned in a previous video that the running costs is actually $1.9 per hour for the proving side of it, which is quite a low cost, quite manageable, quite impressive. The whole process itself is obviously very power and time intensive, so due to its complexity. So Polygon, they use something called a recursive proof method, which is very common within zk snarks, and this is mainly being designed by the Mir protocol. So basically they use thousands and thousands of virtual machines to verify the transactions all in parallel, and they just keep bundling and aggregating it together until you've got one proof. And then that proof is then submitted as that sequence hash over to the Ethereum chain. It doesn't need to include, you know, all the transaction information and stuff, because that's done on a separate route from the final state. Sorry, the balance information is done on a separate state. So as a result, this computational bit takes a lot of the work out. It's done off-chain via the CPUs, able to scale and put all these transactions on Ethereum a lot quicker than it would be going through directly on Ethereum through the Ethereum validators. Outside of this EVM, there is another EVM that Polygon are working on, and that is called Polygon Zero Knowledge Miden, which I'll just bring up on here. So it's actually an MVM, as in a Miden virtual machine. Now, this isn't actually released yet, and part of the reason for that is because it is looking to, let's just say, find the next iteration of Zero Knowledge Starks. Now, Zero Knowledge Starks, scalable transparent argument of knowledge, works differently from Zero Knowledge Snarks. One, it's written in Rust programming language, which is not EVM compatible. That's why you've got Miden virtual machine, which would still be compatible with Solidity and Viper. Starks are also resistant to quantum computer attacks, which is not something that Snarks are. But there are a lot of challenges around that and a lot of risk, and this is why they need a bit of time to build it. So with Starks, you need a lot more computational power to complete, because you're doing a lot more transactions. The gas cost is quite high as well, so they need to find a way to either a new technology or improve the existing tech to find a way to keep the gas cost down, because there's no point in having high gas cost if you're trying to scale Ethereum and try and bring that down. It's just counterintuitive. And as I said earlier, there's not much flexibility in terms of languages, smart contracts and dApps. So that's the other area they're working on. But Polygon seem confident, and what they've predicted is, if all goes well, they should be able to 10 to 100x the amount of transactions that zk snarks do on the current Zero Knowledge EVM. Here's the one thing that I had no idea about, and it does actually bust one of the myths I've seen from, well, say one, quite a lot of the noise I've seen on Twitter. Some of you may have heard something called Zero Knowledge EVM equivalents, right? Now, at the moment, I will say this, there is no project or protocol that is completely Zero Knowledge EVM equivalent. There is none. So if you hear anyone saying that, it is total rubbish. This is the EVM scale. So the lower the number you are, then if you're number one, then you can say you are EVM equivalent. Anything higher than this is not EVM equivalent. Now, it's not to say that it's right or wrong, because the higher the type, the more innovation you have around the proofs, for example. So Miden, for example, when that will be released, I think it'll be somewhere around here, just because of the way it's looking at the proofs. And as I said earlier, there's not a lot of compatibility in terms of the languages and the way it's being put together at the moment. The current Polygon Zero Knowledge EVM is actually Type 3. So it's actually EVM compatible. I'd probably say EVM compatible 2.0 based on the Zero Knowledge element, but it is Type 3. What Polygon have said is they're working towards getting to Type 2. Vitalik piped up in the mainnet video with the Polygon leads, and what he was saying is, ideally, you do want some protocols, some scaling solutions to be EVM Type 1, because that will really help with scaling. But also, what you want is protocols that actually have all five of these different types, because what that allows you to do from a business perspective is you can create a white label product or an infrastructure and say, hey, we've got this Type 2, we've got this Type 2.5, we've got this Type 3 Zero Knowledge EVM. Do you want to use this for your business, for your institution? And then they can go and customize it however they need to. And I think based on the reaction and from what some of the Polygon leads were saying, obviously the projects they've got in the pipeline as well, that is what they'll be looking to do over the next few years, is actually have one of each of these types, or more, as this continues to evolve, as the technology continues to evolve. So yeah, I thought that was quite quite an interesting bit here, because I hadn't even heard of an EVM scale before until looking into it. So it's just something to be aware of. But as I said, if you hear anyone saying that one of the competitors or whatever is EVM equivalent, it's not. No one is EVM equivalent yet. Polygon around about here, and Miden, which isn't released yet, is going to be around here somewhere. In terms of the competition, there is quite a lot. I've picked out these ones in particular. You've got zkSync, which I'm sure you guys have seen that on Twitter, which has been released very recently. They made this big thing about an airdrop as well. They are a roll-up solution. You've got Mina Protocol as well. They're another roll-up. I would probably say that they are looking to do very similarly to what Polygon are currently doing. Aztec 3, they are focusing on the privacy element, and they have been able to refine and work the privacy side of Zero Knowledge for a lot longer. I think they're one of the first movers for it. That's their primary focus there. StarkNet, they are another Zero Knowledge roll-up. They've been around similar sort of time in terms of research as all the other ones as well. And I think Immutable X have been using their infrastructure in the past. And then obviously you've got the other two optimistic rollups, which is a completely different type in Optimism and Arbitrum. Optimism, as we know, has got a big partnership with Coinbase, and Arbitrum just seems to be doing well. If you take GMX, for example, and some of the other dApps they've got on chain as well. So these are the main competitors. I would probably say, in terms of the maturity of the technology, everyone is pretty much in the same phase of research, although Aztec, as I said earlier, they're probably more experienced in the privacy element of Zero Knowledge rollups than the others. Now, there is one obvious competitor I've left off this list, and there is a very, 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 very good reason for it, and that is called Immutable X. Now, this is quite a recent partnership. Immutable X are primarily focused on the gaming side of it, and they teamed up with Polygon to produce another Zero Knowledge EVM chain, which is in the works. I don't know what it's going to be called yet. I don't think they've come up with a name yet. I think they said it might be called Immutable X or something, and it will be a chain that is purely designed for gaming. So Polygon provide the infrastructure, operationally, in terms of onboarding, the operations, the web services, the customer service, the user-facing sides, that will all be branded and controlled by Immutable X. This is very much, I wouldn't say the clash, but the merging of the titans, because if you look at their backing, if you look, for example, in terms of the gaming side of it, Polygon, I think they've got a partnership with Earn Alliance, Polyverse, Atari. I'm sure you guys know that back in the day. Square Enix as well, Sandbox, and many others. Immutable X have got partnerships with Warner Brothers. They've got a number of games on their chain as well. And you know, in terms of their traffic, they've had sort of 20 billion API requests in the last quarter as well. So, you know, they're really going in on the gaming side. They've got a lot of money backing it as well. And in terms of the zero knowledge technology as a whole, Polygon have pledged to invest 1 billion into the research over the coming years, which is absolutely massive. I actually think it wouldn't surprise me if they started buying up some of the competition at some point, but I'll talk about that in a little bit. Now, this is all good, but obviously there are risks involved. One of the big risks with this partnership as well is I don't think people realise how difficult it is to get a successful game out there running on the market. Now, this fact here, this is purely just, you know, outside of blockchain and Web3. You know, 4% of games that go into production will only turn a profit. And out of those, only 20% of those, you know, become store household names. Imagine what that's like in Web3, where I don't think anyone has hit the winning formula yet. So they could spend all this money and get all this infrastructure in and not be able to hit a single game. So that is a big risk. Where they want to go with it, aside from just having this gaming chain, they have also talked about creating other zero-knowledge EVMs using Polygon's infrastructure, and then allowing other gaming companies to say, okay, well, what customization do you want? We've got the white label product here. Tell us what you want, and we'll give you one of those types that we talked about earlier in the EVM scale. But that's much further down the line. That's just what their main aim is. So that's one of the risks. So the other risk side you've got is technology behind zero-knowledge EVMs, still very new. And that not just applies to Polygon, that's all the other competition that I've talked about earlier as well. So, you know, you either want to get ahead of the pack or you want to try and join one of the leaders there. And then also from the technological side, there's going to be a lot of bugs and issues. We've already seen zero knowledge, ZK Sync, for example, have a number of hacks since their launch. Polygon have also had their problems as well. When I've been in the dev discords, I've seen people complaining about a lot of latency, and we saw that spike as well. There's an issue there. So this is still a beta, mind you, but there will be obviously, you know, challenges across the way. But there is obviously a lot of money and a lot of technology behind it, trying to overcome that and get better. On the plus point sides, obviously it's got massive financial backing from the Polygon Foundation and all their contacts they made over time. It's got a great relationship with Ethereum as well. Vitalik's a big fan, and obviously I think having people like Yordi, who saved Ethereum a lot of money, and Sandeep as well has got a good working relationship with him, has helped. And the other thing is Polygon also building those multiple types of EVMs, as I mentioned earlier in the EVM scale as well. So, you know, that'll be a type 4, 2.5s, 3s, 2s, 1s, etc., which will help, especially type 1, which will massively help scale the